us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently. Don't
miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, Nadeem Zahawi and Jeremy Hunt are the latest to fall in the increasingly dirty Tory leadership race. Now there's huge pressure for the right to unite behind Foreign Secretary Liz Truss to stop backstabbing Boris Johnson assassin Fishy Rishi and soaring grassroots favourite Penny Mordaunt, who received a massive boost after a new poll showed she's thrashing the duplicitous former Chancellor among Tory members. I'll give my verdict on the battle to be PM next. Then my superstar panel weigh in. Tonight, I'm joined by top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks and broadcaster Ashley James. Earlier today, Boris bowed out with grace at what he hinted would be his final PM cues.
I will be leaving soon with my head held high.
It's got me thinking, why aren't more people chilled to the bone by the media stoking a revolt against a democratically elected PM? Well, Spiked Online's Brendan O'Neill is here on that at 9:50. He'll also outline why, in his eyes, Rishi can't be PM. Is Jacob Rees-Mogg right to refuse to serve in a Sunak cabinet over his disloyalty to Boris?
Will you accept a cabinet post from Rishi Sunak?
No, of course I wouldn't.
We'll debate that and whether leadership contenders should give Boris a role in their cabinet at 10 p.m. Did Penny Mordaunt do enough at her campaign launch today to put to bed suggestions she's woke on issues like gender ideology?
I'm a woman. I am biologically a woman.
One of the most significant figures fighting back against trans extremist Olympic swimmer Sharon Davies will give her verdict on the candidates at 10:20. Columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddell breaks down why the culture wars should be the most important topic in the Tory leadership battle and uncancelled at 10:40, plus why a Sunak premiership would be a disaster for the Red Wall. And after Mordaunt vows to return power to parents, should mums, dads and carers be given a childcare budget? We'll debate that proposal from one of the Tory leadership frontrunners in the media buzz at 10:30. Plus, can we trust any of the candidates to deliver on their crowd-pleasing policies? Well, I've got body language expert Judy James on the case to analyse the hidden messages of their leadership pitches. And as the equivalent of 3 million people lose faith in the corporation in just a year, is BBC News still impartial? I know the answer to that, but I'll have two of the Beep's most familiar faces, Jenny Bond and Dame Esther Ranson, battling it out with former BBC journalist turned critic Robert Aitken and the entertainer Christopher Biggins. I want your thoughts on this one too, of course. Tomorrow's newspaper front pages will be delivered hot off the press throughout the show as well. And after Liverpool fans are today vindicated, will UEFA and the French authorities be crowned honorary union jackasses after scoring an own goal over the Champions League final fiasco? Don't miss that just before the end of the show. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. These stories are heartbreaking, but the establishment and mainstream media silence around them is rage-inducing. COVID vaccine damage is the tale they don't want to touch. Ignoring it altogether is far easier than tackling the difficult questions such tragedies pose. The young woman with the world at her feet who's lost her musician fiancé. The family who are forever without their talented BBC DJ daughter. The scaffolder who's lost his leg and fears how he will feed his children in the years to come. While those stories are at the tragic end of the scale, if you look hard in your own life, it won't take you long to find other woeful scenarios largely being brushed away by authorities, by friends, by family and by those in power. In my life, it's the 26-year-old young woman at virtually no risk from COVID who now finds herself suffering with heartbeats of 170 beats per minute, an utterly terrifying likely side effect of the myocarditis she now suffers. She took the vaccine because she was told it was for the greater good of society, but now finds herself feeling scared, alone and ignored. Now, it's utterly critical to say that shining a light on these stories does not make you an anti-vax COVID conspiracy theorist, as the boring tropes go. So thank you to the brilliant Mark Stein for tonight's important and landmark vaccine damage special here on GB News. Thank you most to the inspirational participants who are themselves injured or have suffered unimaginable loss. It was an honour to meet you all, and I fully support your fight. Like Mark, here on GB News, I've been determined to ask the questions and shine a light on these tragic stories the rest of the media seem too afraid to touch. Now, back to the race to be Prime Minister. I've got a special digest coming up, and then today's superstar panel weigh in. Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster, plus a former Tory staffer as well. Amanda Patel is here. So too, businessman and activist Adam Brooks. And returning, it's great to see the broadcaster Ashley James. But before all of that, the news headlines at 9 with Olivia Guthrie.
Dan, thank you. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi and former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt are out of the race to replace Boris Johnson. The candidates to become the next Tory leader have been whittled down from 8 to 6. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt won the most votes in the first ballot of Tory MPs. The others still in the running are Tom Tugendhat, Liz Truss, Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch. Sir Graham Brady announced the results of the vote earlier this evening.
Under the rules that we agreed for this ballot, 2 candidates will be eliminated, Jeremy Hunt and Nadhim Zahawi. The others are all able to go forward to the second ballot, which takes place tomorrow.
Another train strike is taking place 2 weeks from today. Rail operators and Network Rail workers have voted to walk out on July the 27th in an ongoing dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. The RMT union rejected an offer made by Network Rail bosses, saying it represents a real-term pay cut for its members. More than 200,000 people who died during the pandemic have COVID recorded on their death certificate. The grim milestone was reached a few weeks ago amid a surge of cases in the UK. The ONS says the highly transmissible Omicron subvariant BA2 now accounts for most of the new cases. About 2.7 million people are thought to be infected currently. A watchdog says migrants crossing the Channel are arriving in the UK soaking wet and with petrol burns. The Chief Inspector of Prisons says he's concerned about the haphazard arrangements in place for those arriving. It follows figures obtained by GB News, which show more than 14,000 migrants have come to Britain in small boats so far this year. 4 men have been arrested in the UK in a national crime agency operation targeting people smugglers. Ambulance services are facing the sort of pressures normally seen in winter as the UK grapples with an extreme heatwave. The government says it's working to make sure the NHS has the capacity and resilience it needs. An amber heat warning's been issued across parts of England and Wales from Sunday onwards. The Met Office says the hot weather is a potential danger to everyone, not just those who are most vulnerable, and is advising people to be careful. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dan.
So all week, the usual suspects in the political establishment and the MSM, especially the BBC, ITV News and Sky News, have been trying to convince you that Rishi Sunak was the inevitable candidate to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader and thus becoming Prime Minister of this great country. As ever, they've been selling you a load of piffle cooked up in the Westminster bubble. But from the moment Boris was brutally deposed in that completely unnecessary coup, I've been telling you there's zero chance Tory party members, many of whom are horrified about the treatment of the Prime Minister, will elect the knife-wielding ex-Chancellor. Sure enough, proof today from a YouGov poll of Conservative Party members who, let's remember, exclusively decide who will be the next PM from a shortlist of 2 chosen by Tory MPs. The survey stunned many in Westminster and the media, but not me, by showing Sunak will be absolutely thrashed by Penny Mordaunt and Liz Truss, and solidly beaten too by Kemi Badenoch and even Tom Tugendhat. Former Defence Secretary Mordaunt took a storming lead in that poll, thrashing every opponent amongst Tory members. It backed up a similar poll by Conservative Home earlier in the week. In fact, today, well, you could say it was almost a perfect day of campaigning for Penny, whose campaign launch for the PM for PM campaign was described as the best ever by veteran Tory David Davis, who lost to David Cameron back in the runoff in 2005. Look.
So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the Right Honourable Penny Mordaunt MP, our next Prime Minister. We've got to stave off a recession. We've got to deliver on the huge ambitions the British people have, having left the European Union. The British people are fed up. They're fed up with us not delivering. They're fed up with unfulfilled promises. And they're fed up with divisive politics. So we need to do some serious machinery of government changes. We're going to have a tighter cabinet. We're going to have ministers of state that have clear and timely deliverables and are powerful and can reach across Whitehall. And we also need to let our citizens live well. From me, you're going to get a relentless focus on cost of living issues.
And that launch, of course, took place before she even knew the results of that poll. Tory grandees, they might tell you Sunak can win it, but he won't. So party members should be given a real choice between Penny and probably Truss, who is emerging as the favoured candidate on the right of the party, especially amongst Boris supporters. Although both Badenoch and Braverman remain in the race with significant support too. We shouldn't forget that. But Truss is making her case as the candidate of the Brexiteers, even though she reluctantly voted Remain in 2016. In her first interview of the campaign with tomorrow's edition of The Spectator magazine, she's actually addressed this. So this is what Truss has said. If I could vote now, I would vote to leave the European Union. I was a reluctant Remainer. I was loyal to the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, but since the referendum, I've put my shoulder to the wheel in terms of delivering the opportunities of Brexit. Jacob Rees-Mogg, he took things up again today too, branding Sunak a socialist and revealing it was Truss who had tried to stop Sunak's high tax agenda in Cabinet. In an explosive Daily Mail column, he wrote, While the economy was at its most fragile, she opposed his plan to raise corporation tax by around 30% next year, which will deter investment and economic growth when we need it most. Sunak has squandered the Conservative Party's decade-long efforts to build a competitive tax regime, and it will be the French and the Americans who will benefit instead of the British people. With the Sunak campaign's dirty tricks continuing at full force, the pressure really is now on Braverman and Badenoch to unite with Truss in a dream ticket for the right. As the Daily Telegraph's Christopher Hope revealed tonight, wow, I am picking up pressure tonight from ERG sources for Suella Braverman, Liz Truss and Kemi Badenoch to merge campaigns and blow Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt out the water. Now, what I'm convinced of is that the best thing for the country and for the Conservative Party is for Sunak to drop out of this race. Fishy Rishi's not going to win this, and Tory members deserve a real choice. Let me bring in my superstar panel now. The Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, the businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and the broadcaster Ashley James. So, Amanda Platel, I wanted to come to you first on this because regular viewers will remember that on last week's show, you revealed that Penny Mordaunt used to work for you. but you weren't totally positive about her. Now, in the last week, Amanda, she is now far and away the favourite to be our next Prime Minister. So has your view changed at all?
OK, Dan, I've got to tell you that I wasn't going to come tonight, OK? I watched the 5 o'clock results and I felt so depressed. I thought if we really have the choice to lead the Conservative Party between a betraying snake, an ironing board Liz Truss, we know who the snake is.
So it's the snake Sunak.
The snake Sunak. And then we've got Liz Truss or Penny Mordaunt. I just thought I wanted to self-harm. I saw my emery...
Well, please don't do that.
I saw my emery board on the table in front of me, and I thought, no, don't do it. Go and do the show. OK, let me tell you what...
Thank goodness you are here.
Let me tell you the total fantasy of all this. All these people coming out saying Penny Mordaunt's so wonderful, right? When I was doing research for a piece a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed 3 or 4 former cabinet ministers, all of which said she is a great girl. She's a great Briton, but she, as I said before, slow off the mark. One of them said to me very famously, the problem about replacing Boris, who has the brain of Britain, with Penny, who has the brain of the Isle of Man. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, but I'm just repeating what they said. And then I turn on the TV set. I turn it on, Jesus, it's on all the time. And there I see these same former cabinet ministers who've briefed me against her, saying I'm supporting her.
That's politics.
But she's just not up to the job, for God's sake.
OK, so can I just ask you about... Can I ask you about your personal experience with her? Because that's quite interesting. Because she must have been a young lass, because it was when you were working for the Tory party. Of course, and you still are. You still are.
Younger.
Close shave. But
I could still leave, you know. I've got that emery board in my handbag.
So is this when you were working for...
Working for William Hague.
She
was a junior press officer. And she was brilliant. She was so diligent. She used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to walk to the bus, to get a train, to get into the office at 6 o'clock. I mean, she's diligent.
That's the type of person you want working for you.
Oh,
right?
crikey, someone who can catch a bus, for Christ's sake.
No, that level
that's
of commitment.
not what you want,
that
running
level
the
of
country.
Commitment.
I mean, please. I mean, the problem is with Penny is that she's just not the brightest tool in the box, and the insidious thing that's happening is that a whole bunch of really powerful, clever people are supporting her because they want her in as a puppet Prime Minister. And I think we deserve better than that.
So do you agree with me that the right are going to have to unite? That the right are going to have to unite behind Liz Truss and fast, because otherwise this could become a runaway train.
Yeah, there's a lot of movements tonight. I mean, everyone's on the phone.
What's happening?
They're moving their votes away to try and support Liz Truss. But, I mean, honestly, I'm kind of ashamed to be a Conservative these days. This is the best we've got, to present to the country, when we just booted out a guy who's one of the most electoral successes that we've ever seen, I despair. If I still had my Conservative card, I would tear it up right now and throw it out. Wow. I despair.
Adam, very powerful words from Amanda, who's obviously someone who has worked in the party, remained loyal to the party.
And been a Conservative all my life.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of Conservatives are feeling that way, Adam, and I think what's so fascinating, the media's automatically moved on. It's like, they got there, man. Boris who, with, you know, he's over to them. But to the members, Adam, they still remain, on the whole, completely outraged by folk like Sunak for stabbing him in the back.
And I think, you know, the pennies
the pennies dropped.
But, you know, him and his team must be sitting there thinking, oh, what have we got to do here? You know, they're coming up with all these schemes.
Sunak's team.
You know, they're coming up with all these scheming moves and such. But what sort of resonates with me? If they're prepared to backstab colleagues that they've worked with for so long.
Exactly.
What would they be prepared to do to the likes of me and you?
Yeah,
you know,
and your business.
And our...
well, you don't want to vote for the Tories at the next election, do you? Because of the fact that they introduced COVID regulations.
Right, so COVID regulations and restrictions and the way they went about it, I've seen a lot of colleagues, good people, lose businesses, lose houses, you know, lose everything.
But Adam, could one of those candidates that you see today, could one of them potentially convince you back? Do you think?
I see Penny as the safe bet, and I've said that since January. But now, the more I'm looking at it, I'm looking at Kemi, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I think she would be a breath of fresh air. I think
she's got so many good qualities, but the issue is, when you've got Sunak and Mordaunt with all of those MPs,
and come on, Dan, who'd ever even heard of her 3 weeks ago? Let's be
not
honest.
many of the British public. I've always found her a very impressive minister.
Very.
Look, let's remember, they all went along with the restrictions. So for me to vote for one of them, it's not going to happen.
Okay, can I just ask you one thing? If Rishi were to wear a Zelensky T-shirt like the one you're wearing
Have you done this tonight, Adam, as a special request by Amanda?
You told me to keep Amanda happy, so I've put on my green T-shirt.
What do you think Rishi would look like in a Zelensky
I'm not sure
T-shirt, which he's wearing very finely tonight?
Do they do an extra small?
OK, Ashley, let's bring this back to the topic at hand.
I think I'm actually going to surprise you. So, for me, personally, getting rid of Boris, it was like a septic scab. He kept breaking the law, lying, promoting a sex offender.
We didn't keep breaking the law. Let's stick to the facts.
He broke the law, he lied. Anyway, he's gone. I was quite, like you, depressed at the prospect of who our leader might be, and I've looked and I've paid quite close attention, and I am actually quite impressed by Penny. And as someone who is more centre-left, she is actually someone who I would consider voting for. And I like what she says because she doesn't stoke up culture wars. I feel like our country needs united, and I like the fact she said, it's like the public are fed up of not delivering. The lack of confidence and lack of trust in the government is depressing for the left and the right. Like you said, you would rip up your Conservative membership. I feel like a bit like I wouldn't know who.
But Amanda, isn't that the point? So Ashley maybe represents the wider electorate, but not the Tory party.
Yeah, I think that someone like me who's embedded in it, I think Ashley's view is actually more interesting about Penny because you come with a fresh view. You're seeing this woman for the first time. You don't, and I think
And Amanda, people develop over the course of 20 years.
But also,
From catching that bus and 4 in the morning. Can I just say Penny's had a bit of experience since then,
I've just got to say, Dan, that your brain does not enlarge over time.
Oh, God.
I actually thought she was very witty.
OK, well, I hope you don't judge me for what I was like at bloody 20 years old.
And she is very quick and very witty, and I was very impressed. But my reason for not putting faith in Rishi is because he also got a fixed penalty notice for breaking lockdown rules, and that is, for a lot of the public, unforgivable. It doesn't matter, it's unforgivable. We abided by lockdown rules, a lot of us, and I'm sorry, we felt betrayed, we feel betrayed, and also there's been a lot of controversy surrounding him with his non-dom status, etc., and the fact that he betrayed Boris Johnson. So I personally feel like Rishi becoming Prime Minister, it won't restore trust in the public.
We've
Whereas
never had
Penny
a Prime
is a
Minister
fresh
with
face.
ears
She's
that big.
exciting. And I feel like she'll also be a good voice for lots of women's rights as well. So.
OK, final word out of...
Although, Ashley, can we just...
But the other part of me...
OK, we're going to fight here. I'm going to get in first, because I'm sitting here, is that she is ambiguous about what a woman means.
OK, final word out of...
Probably have the most attractive world leader in
the biggest breasts.
That's completely irrelevant. We should focus on what politicians say and not what they look like.
Yes, good point.
I agree.
Good point. Amanda McDowell, Adam Brooks, Ashley Chase. Lots to unpack tonight on the Tory leadership battle, so they are with me throughout the show. But coming up, can we trust the Conservative leadership candidates to deliver on their pledges? I've got body language expert Judy James on the case to analyse whether she can expose what they're really saying.
Get it out, Dan. Just get it out. Come on.
Sorry, it's that comment
It's
about
break time.
Penny Morden's breasts.
Don't talk about her breasts.
You did. Anyway, but up next in The Clash, as millions of people lose faith in the BBC in just 1 year, is the broadcast we pay so much for still impartial? Two of the corporation's most famous faces, Jenny Bond and Dame Esther Ranson, battle ex-Beeb journalist turned critic Robert Aitken and entertainer Christopher Biggins. Really want to know what you think on this? Email me, Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle at GBNews. Our poll running there too. The results in just 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel. Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Brendan O'Neill and Sharon Davies coming up. But first, it's time for The Clash. Now, among the outrage over the BBC's shocking list of highest paid stars this week, topped by ultimate wokester Gary Lineker on a £1.3 million salary, the bombshell revelation that millions no longer trust the Beeb to report fairly slipped under the radar. So listen to this. In the BBC's latest annual report, just 51% of UK adults think the public service broadcast is effective at providing news and current affairs that is impartial. That's down from 56% on the previous year, according to an Ipsos Mori poll of over 16s. That's the equivalent of some 3 million Brits who could have lost faith in Auntie in just the last 12 months alone. Now, we asked the BBC about the growing lack of faith from viewers that their news service is impartial, and hilariously, they actually disputed their own figures, believe it or not. A spokesman told us tonight, With the easing of COVID-19 restrictions, this survey was conducted face-to-face in 2021-22. The previous year's survey in 2021 had to be undertaken via telephone mobile because of the pandemic. Because of the difference in method, the results are not directly comparable, so are not repeated in our report. As the old saying goes, denial ain't just a river in Egypt. Let's get real here. The BBC's tick-box descent into wokeness has seen them fail to reflect public opinion on everything from Brexit and COVID to Boris Johnson smashing the red wall to pieces. BBC chiefs on six-figure salaries have let their liberal bias bleed into programming and embolden the likes of newsreader Emily Maitlis and former Newsnight policy editor Lewis Goodall. Both of them, thank goodness, have now run off to some left-wing radio station. So what do you think? Is BBC News impartial? Email me, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet your thoughts to @gbnews. Our poll running there too. To help you make up your mind on this, though, let me bring in former BBC journalist Robin Aitken, the actor Christopher Biggins, and two famous BBC faces, the royal commentator Jenny Bond and the journalist and television presenter Dame Esther Ranson. So, Robin Aitken, you used to work at the BBC, but this is fascinating, isn't it? Over the course of a year, 3 million Brits effectively saying, no, we no longer trust the BBC, and just 51% now saying that the public service broadcaster is impartial. In reality, Robin, 99% of people should think the BBC is impartial, right?
Look, I think there are a number of things going on here, but it's clear that the penny has dropped. There was a time when people imbibed with their mother's milk the idea that the BBC was impartial. My experience through my 25 years at the BBC as a reporter was that it wasn't. And that was very clear to me, and I think it's becoming much clearer to a lot of other people. And I think one of the reasons for that is because we've come through a period in British politics which has been very polarised, and the BBC actually failed to reflect fairly the two sides in those big debates, particularly in the Brexit debate. I think Brexit was something which threw into sharp relief just where the BBC's heart really lies. And on that big and very important issue, they failed lamentably to be impartial.
Dame Esther Ranson, you disagree?
Well, the first thing I would say is it's very, very important that we stay sceptical. Whoever we listen to, even if we listen to you, Dan, because what
I want
we
that.
have learned, sorry about that. What we've learned through the Ukraine tragedy is that Russia believes completely, implicitly, what they're told by the state-run media there. So therefore, the war, the terrible, tragic, desperately important war, which is putting the whole of Europe at risk, they are, 80% of them are still behind it. So it's really important that all of us stay sceptical. That being said, if you have a look at that survey that you've quoted, you will find that the number of people that don't think the BBC is effective and impartial has also dropped by about the same amount. And the fascinating thing is, if you ask people, as this survey did, who really regularly follow the news, which broadcaster, which medium they most trust, 48% say the BBC, and the next highest is 8% who say Sky News. So the BBC, we turn to the BBC in moments of crisis. And the BBC, I know, and I'm sure Jenny knows, that the BBC takes that responsibility desperately seriously. And the Director General is many things, but he's not a lefty liberal.
Biggins, there has been a change, though, hasn't there? I mean, yeah, I was someone that when Jenny Bond was reporting on the royal family, I tended to trust what the BBC told me. But Biggins, things have changed over the past few years. I mean, do you still watch Biggins' BBC News and trust what they tell you?
I don't. I mean, I was always one who would switch at 6 o'clock in the evening. Whatever I was watching, I would turn to BBC One because I thought that was the best news we had. And it was fantastic. However, I do think over the last couple of years, it has turned into something very political. And I love you, Esther, but I just disagree with you because I think the problem is that they're not telling the truth. And I think they're so biased that it's a real problem that we have. And I don't think it's a problem that should be taught or listened to or even, I mean, I think the radio, for instance, I love Radio 2, and that is changing now. There's so many things that are happening with the BBC, and I don't know where to go. I mean, I used to love it. I don't love it anymore.
Jenny Bond, have you noticed that change that Christopher Biggins talks about?
Christopher, maybe listen to 5 Live, and there you will hear a very broad spectrum of opinion. I work with Robin alongside. I've done one more year than you, Robin. I was there for 26 years at the BBC. I wrote the news, I edited the news, I reported the news, and I presented the news. And never, ever was I told what I should say, or did I see any bias whatsoever. All my bosses wanted to know was that as a journalist, I was getting the facts as quickly as I could, as accurately as I could, and getting them out there. And as a specialist, giving my analysis of it. But never did anyone tell me what I should say. And Robin, I don't know what your politics was at the BBC. I have no idea. I had no idea of the people I presented with or my colleagues. I didn't know what their politics were, and it didn't matter because we're professional.
Robin, how do you respond to that?
If I could come in there, Jenny, and it's great to see you again, Jenny. And yes, we were young reporters back in the radio newsroom back in the day. I think that the BBC's bias is evident in so many areas of its coverage. For instance, the reporting of the Supreme Court decision 10 days ago on the abortion rights thing in the US. The BBC's coverage of that in every outlet, and I know this because I've checked through many of them. I've checked through the coverage because I'm interested in it. The tone of all that coverage is that this is a regressive and bad thing to have happened, that the Supreme Court was wrong to overturn Roe v. Wade. And that is just taken as read by the BBC. Now, Jenny, you say you didn't know what the politics of your colleagues was back when you worked at the BBC. I knew very well what the politics of my colleagues was, because I found myself outside the mainstream. Look, I'm unashamedly someone who's always been on the right. I mean, I'm a right-wing person, if you like. I'm not an extreme right-wing person, I'm just a mainstream right-wing type person. And I know that there was a great deal of prejudice, for instance, in the 80s against Mrs. Thatcher. I mean, she was loathed in the BBC, wasn't she, Jenny? I mean, you be honest now. Did you know anybody in the BBC newsroom who was a supporter of Mrs. Thatcher, aside possibly from myself?
Jenny?
Andy? Well, I didn't quiz them about it. I simply got on with the reporting of it, and I reported on Mrs. Thatcher myself. I reported on her leaving Downing Street that time with tears in her eyes. I was there and on the air. I didn't question anyone's politics about it. I don't know, Robin. You leave me speechless, particularly about the Supreme Court. And if there was some bias on the BBC about that, which I don't believe there was, well, good for them.
Yeah,
but that's the point, isn't it?
That is exactly the point. The thing is, Jenny, that of course,
I'm saying I have no idea if there was any bias, but personally, you've got to. I'm a woman who believes passionately about the. If I was reporting on it, I would say both sides of the argument. But you've got me there on the abortion.
You're a BBC woman to your core. And I always admired you as a reporter. I thought you did a great job. But look, the very fact that you see nothing wrong with the fact that the BBC is actually quite determinedly biased on the question of abortion and the so-called right to choose is exactly my point. Your sort of opinion on an issue like that was completely unexceptional within the BBC. In fact, that opinion was shared by the great majority of your colleagues, and that is the problem. Don't you understand that we all have to pay for the BBC, and therefore we have a right to have our views represented as well as your views?
Dame Esther, do you want to respond to that, Dame Esther?
I think it is quite interesting because Mrs. Thatcher helped me launch Childline. Childline was launched on the BBC. Now, Childline is not impartial. Childline is adamantly against child abuse and neglect. We do not accept that any child should suffer, and we take that view very strongly, very passionately, and so did Mrs. Thatcher. Now, Mrs. Thatcher had many criticisms to make about the BBC. Not for one moment was she a fan herself, but at the same time, she saw the launch of Childline, she supported it, and she gave us a reception at 10 Downing Street. Now, I, at that time, was a BBC journalist, a BBC presenter, and a BBC producer. But I saw nothing wrong about working in partnership with her on a subject in which I am not impartial. When it comes to a fraught issue like abortion, there is a gender gap, isn't there? An awful lot of women regard this as a woman's decision about her own autonomy and her own body. And one of the good things that has happened in the BBC is that more and more women have responsible roles on programmes like Woman's Hour, but in programmes across the board.
Yeah. But I think Robin's point, though, is that obviously in America, this is a hot-button political issue where the country is essentially split 50-50. And if you watch the BBC with their coverage of Roe v. Wade, that's not what you would believe. Christopher Biggins, final word to you. Can the BBC win you back in some way, or do you feel like you've lost faith with their news service after the past few years?
I hope it can bring me back, but I don't think it can. I think I'm lost out to it now, very, very sadly. And I would just like to say before we finish that Amanda would make a very good Prime Minister.
She would, wouldn't she?
Earlier, and she
Amanda Patel for PM.
I'm going to give my vote to Amanda.
Yes, good point. Very good point. She'll love that. The entertainer, Christopher Biggins, former BBC journalist Robin Aiken, the royal commentator Jenny Bond, and the famed BBC presenter Dame Esther Ransom. Thank you all. So who do you agree with on this? Is the BBC News impartial? From Mark, BBC News is a left-wing sniping institution that does absolutely nothing to uphold its fine traditions of the past for being a democratic British institution with impartial comment. Sean on Twitter says BBC News is too woke nowadays. It didn't show the likes of the 12th of July parades yesterday as they're so obsessed with COVID and too busy damaging Boris Johnson's reputation. But don't worry, of course, we did broadcast those parades here on GB News. And Terry says via email, yes, the BBC is impartial and most of the country agrees. But what about GB News viewers? Just 10% of you think BBC News is impartial. 90% of you, by the way, if you couldn't guess, I'm with you, say BBC News is no longer impartial. The days of the likes of Jenny Bond are long gone, sadly. Coming up, why the revolt again? But first, can we trust the Tory leadership candidates to deliver on their pledges as they set out their pitches and policies? Body language expert Judy James reveals the Tory tells next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Brendan O'Neill and a first look at tomorrow's front page is still to come, but it's body language time now with the country's top expert, Judy James. And tonight she's analysing whether we can really trust what the Tory leadership candidates are telling us. And breaking tonight, Jeremy Hunt, eliminated from the leadership contest earlier today after the second round of voting, has shock horror. I couldn't see this one coming. Backed Rishi Sunak to be the next Prime Minister. Perhaps the most predictable endorsement I've ever heard. Judy, I want to take a look first at Fishy Rishi. This was a moment yesterday when he gave a very animated and scripted commentary on his former boss, Boris. Let's be honest, no one was buying. Watch.
Boris Johnson is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And whatever some commentators may say, he has a good heart. Is he flawed? Yes. And so are the rest of us.
Judy, sorry, I'm just looking for my sick bucket because I couldn't cope with the sort of faux sincerity there. I mean, Judy, he didn't mean a word of that, did he?
No, and they should learn not to try, really. I mean, it's probably better to say nothing. What we've got here, and look, we've got the rotating eye contact, we've got the over-choreographed gesticulation. The way that he was speaking wasn't normal speech patterns. I think he put a full stop before and after the word "and," which is totally unnatural. And this was a very, very low moment. And that over gesticulation at the end, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I think we should use as a litmus test with all of these leaders, would you buy life insurance from them, I think is really quick. And Rishi, in this state, I think the answer has to be no. I mean, as a leader, Dan, he's got kind of this retro body language. It's very smiling. He does the power stance. He does the thumb of power. He looks like he's been marinating in good fortune all his life, but unfortunately that will quite quickly convert to smug in the electorate's eyes, given the kind of circumstances he'll be taken over in. So, no, I'm afraid he wouldn't have convinced me. It was a low point when it comes to convincing me with his body language here.
Judy, I want to show you another moment where he tried to avoid questions from journalists at the newspapers, but he was then forced to give time when he was challenged by The Sun's political editor, Harry Cole. Watch.
That's all we've got time for now. I'm sure we'll be doing this lots more. Right? I've got a bunch of people waiting for me next door. But we have actually, Harry, we could do one from you quickly, and then Nissi will get mad at me. OK, two excellent questions, Harry. So thanks for asking them. So look, firstly on Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings has had absolutely nothing to do with this campaign, and will have absolutely nothing to do with any government that I'm privileged to lead. Yeah.
He wasn't happy, though. What was he, Judy, about having to answer that question?
No, and he needs to learn the technique that when you're not happy, you don't try and over-smile. It doesn't work. It looks like huge denial, and he's doing that a lot. I don't even believe there was a bunch of people in the next room, actually. I think that was probably his PR and a cup of tea or something like that. It's not, it kind of shows that he's been hurt. He kind of overturns on the charm. And that implies that he's deeply unhappy. And then he has a couple of times now, not stormed out, but he's kind of walked out at that point. This is the problem with Rishi. We've seen him giving away money. We've seen him looking like very popular. I've always called him Blair-like with his body language. He's got the same kind of Bambi appeal with the wide eyes, etc. But under pressure, he doesn't perform well. And boy, is he going to be under pressure if he takes over leadership of the party. The other thing, Dan, that I will completely cut off will be if he starts doing what Tony Blair used to do to try and sound like a man of the people. Do you remember the Mockney accent that he used to put on?
Oh,
if
yes.
he does that, he's lost me completely.
Then it will be over.
I'm out of here.
Good point, Judy. Look, I want to move on to Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary. She's kind of a low profile so far, but let's look at her launch video.
In the next election, we need to deliver, deliver and deliver for the British people. I know that our country's best days lie ahead. I'm the candidate with a clear vision for the future who can drive change and get things done. We face major challenges as a country, from the economy to security to the environment. And I love our country. I want the best for us all, and I'm the person to deliver that.
Trustworthy, Judy?
I wouldn't say she's not trustworthy, but she's not good at delivering messages. I mean, she doesn't appear to own any of those messages. She doesn't seem to have the genuine passion that she's trying to put in her words. She looks like actually a small child that's been brought out to do a recitation in the garden, rather than somebody that is believing what they're saying. We've got no gesticulation. We've just got a slight nodding of the head. And verbally, and this is always a giveaway, when she gets to the end of her most powerful statements, she does a verbal dying fall. Her voice trails out. Now, if you're really trying to sell a message that you believe in, you keep the power in your voice right to the end. So unfortunately, that makes her look unconvincing.
OK, and Judy, I want to move on to Penny Mordaunt, who, of course, had a brilliant day on the campaign trail today. But actually, the moment I wanted to play you, Judy, was from an interview last night where Mordaunt was, I think, a little bit shocked when she was asked to compliment Keir Starmer.
Say something nice about Keir Starmer.
He's in opposition.
Is that something nice? Can you not think of anything nicer than that?
Well, no, he's I'm sure he's a very decent fellow. But this is quick fire.
OK, all right.
What did you make of that? I thought it was a fascinating exchange, Judy.
I've been banging on about Penny Mordaunt's body language for quite a while now. You know me, I'm a cynic. She gives very good body language, and this is quite remarkable. She immediately, if you notice, takes the leadership stance. The minute that he questions her again, after she's made her quite good, funny line, she does this kind of scratching of the nose, which is quite a kind of tough guy looking gesticulation. But then she says, no, you asked, it was a quick fire round. The other thing, Dan, and it's subtle but powerful, as a woman, women are always under pressure to keep smiling all the time. And I love the way that she doesn't do that. There was no laughing at her own joke. There was no trying to be liked kind of smiling. She's a very, very straight talker, and she's got excellent body language.
Goodness me, Penny Mordaunt's just got a heck of a lot better because she gets the thumbs up from Judy James. Gosh, nothing's going wrong for me today. Well, look, Judy, we'll keep checking in with you as this Tory leadership campaign goes on, so that you can tell us what's really going on with these contenders, Judy James.
Debates, Dan.
Thank you, Judy. Coming up is Boris loyalist Jacob Rees-Mogg right to refuse to serve in backstabbing Sunak's cabinet, and should any leadership contender give Bojo a role? On my Superstar panel, return to debate that in the Media Buzz at 10. Plus, we'll have the first of tomorrow's newspapers in by then too. But first, after the MSM fueled the Westminster witch hunt against Boris, why aren't we more worried about our political future being decided by unelected and out-of-touch media elites? Spiked Online's Brendan O'Neill gives his unmissable take in The Outsider next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Women's rights champion Sharon Davies and top columnist Rod Liddle give their verdicts on the Tory leadership candidates in the next hour. But first, Brendan O'Neill is tonight's outsider. Boris Johnson told PMQs earlier that he's leaving Number 10 with his head held high despite being undemocratically ousted as PM.
It's perfectly true that I leave not at a time of my choosing, and it's absolutely true. But I am proud of the fantastic teamwork that has been involved in all of those projects, both nationally and internationally, Mr. Speaker. And I'm also proud of the leadership that I have given. And I will be leaving, Mr. Speaker. I will be leaving soon with my head held high.
Sadly, that could be our Brexit delivering red wall smashing Prime Minister's final PMQs, but I'll never forget, and nor should you really, that it was the MSM who fuelled the anti-Boris rebellion. Petty scandals about birthday cakes and the behaviour of despicable nobody MPs were deliberately blown out of proportion, given Tory MPs the ammunition to carry out the political assassination the media craved. And it was Fishy Rishi who pulled the trigger. No wonder Sly News and the BBC are predicting the big state high-tax Chancellor of the Exchequer as an underwhelming but inevitable successor to the PM. But what the blinkered BBC and the rest of the media fail to grasp is Tory members don't want a slick but soulless globalist who betrayed Boris when Britain faces a battle for Brexit and an existential war on woke. So, Brendan, we both agree Rishi is the last thing Britain needs right now. But are we now in an age where our political fate is determined by an unelected and out-of-touch small group of media elites in London?
Increasingly, yes, I think that is the case. And the media, it's not as if the media get together and plan these things behind closed doors. It's not that conscious, but the media definitely plays an outsized role in the political sphere, especially the BBC and other sections of the liberal media too. And if you look at what they did with those two completely pathetic scandals, Partygate, where they had a birthday cake for 10 minutes in Downing Street, and also Pinchergate, which is these accusations that Chris Pincher may have occasionally touched a few bottoms or whatever. These are not massive scandals, but they were blown out of proportion by the media. The media turned them into the biggest issues in the country, precisely so that they could weaken Boris and encourage his critics and his enemies to have a go at him and to throw him out of power. So the media media played, I think, a central role in sealing Boris's fate, and that should worry everyone who believes in democracy.
Brendan, is that why they seem to be getting so excited about Sunak and trying to convince everyone Sunak is just the inevitable choice to become Prime Minister? I mean, I was watching ITV News earlier tonight. I've got to do so for research purposes, as you can imagine. And Robert Peston was purposefully misrepresenting that YouGov poll tonight to suggest that it was good news for Rishi Sunak. It was disastrous news for him. It showed him being thrashed by Mordaunt, thrashed by Truss, beaten by Badenoch, beaten by Tugendhat, but he still presented it as a positive poll for Sunak. It feels like they're in the tank for Fishy Rishi.
Yeah, they love Rishi Sunak because they see him as one of them. He's a technocrat. You know, he supported Brexit in a slightly half-hearted way, I think. But he's fundamentally a technocrat. He's a bit of a Blairite. He hangs out in the right kind of circles. He chums up with the media. He's very studious. He's very stiff. They see him as a relief from all the years of populism when ordinary people were voting for apparently crazy things like Brexit and Boris Johnson. They want to get rid of that kind of madness and get the adults back in the room. That's how they see it. So their support for Rishi, the media class's support for Rishi, is really an attempt to put themselves back in the driving seat and to nip in the bud all these crazy populist experiments that us plebs have been carrying out for the past few years. This is what worries me most about the Rishi Sunak phenomenon. I think it would represent a revenge of technocracy against the past few years of political experimentation. And I don't think ordinary people want to go back to that old establishment. We want to keep trying something new and something that actually might work.
Finally, Brendan, the risk with all of this, of course, is that the media and the political establishment won when it came to deposing Boris Johnson. Now, when a similar situation happened in Australia a few years ago, they went through prime ministers at an alarming rate. I mean, there was something like 5 prime ministers in 6 years because the media knew that they were able to perpetuate the sort of consistent scandal that made it impossible for a PM to do their job.
Yeah, I'm really worried about that kind of constant churn and instability in the UK now that the media has a great amount of power in politics. But also, you know, the thing that worries me about Boris Johnson, I mean, he's going now, and in a sense, there's no point crying over spilt milk. But there is a lesson to be learned from this, which is that the people made a very clear statement in 2019. They said, we want Boris Johnson to get Brexit done and to reorientate politics around things that we care about, not what the elites care about. So they set him a very clear agenda. And the fact that he's been thrown out halfway through by undemocratic, unelected forces should worry everyone. This has been a really terrifying moment politically, and we have to remember that as we go ahead.
Indeed. Spiked Online's Brendan O'Neill. Perfectly put. Thank you, Brendan. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, the battle to be PM is heating up as Nadhim Zahawi and Jeremy Hunt crash out in a Conservative leadership race that could be decided by the dark political arts reportedly being employed by the Sunak campaign. But is fiercely loyal Jacob Rees-Mogg right to refuse to serve in a Fishy Rishi cabinet after he stabbed Boris in the back?
Do you accept a cabinet post from Rishi Sunak?
No, of course I wouldn't.
My superstar panel return to debate that next. Joining me tonight, top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks and broadcaster Ashley James. Has Penny Mordaunt consolidated her place as frontrunner for number 10 after shaking off her woke reputation today?
I'm a woman. I am biologically a woman.
And other leadership candidates doing enough to protect the rights of women? Well, one of the most significant figures fighting for females in the gender wars, Olympic swimmer Sharon Davies, gives her verdict at 10:20. Columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle thinks the war on woke ideology should be the #1 issue in this leadership battle. He's uncancelled and unfiltered on that at 10:40. And after Mordaunt vows to fight for families, should parents and carers be given a childcare budget? Plus, can you believe this man has the nuclear codes? More insane behaviour from President Joe Biden coming up in the media buzz. I'll show you that later in the hour. And I'll crown tonight's GBUJ before the night is out too. But first, the news headlines at 10 with Olivia Guthrie.
Thank you, Dan. Our latest headlines tonight. Jeremy Hunt has thrown his weight behind former Chancellor Rishi Sunak for the next Prime Minister, saying he has formidable ability. It's after the former Health Secretary and Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi were knocked out of the race to replace Boris Johnson. The leadership candidates have been whittled down from 8 to 6. Mr Sunak and Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt won the most votes in the first ballot of Tory MPs. The others still in the running are Tom Tugendhat, Liz Truss, Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch. Sir Graham Brady announced the results of the vote earlier this evening.
Under the rules that we agreed for this ballot, 2 candidates will be eliminated, Jeremy Hunt and Nadhim Zahawi. The others are all able to go forward to the second ballot, which takes place tomorrow.
Another train strike is taking place 2 weeks from today. Rail operators and Network Rail workers have voted to walk out on July the 27th in an ongoing dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. The RMT union rejected an offer made by Network Rail bosses, saying it represents a real-term pay cut for its members. More than 200,000 people who died during the pandemic have COVID recorded on their death certificate. The grim milestone was reached a few weeks ago amid a surge of cases in the UK. The ONS says the highly transmissible Omicron subvariant BA2 now accounts for most of the new cases. About 2.7 million people are thought to be infected currently. A watchdog says migrants crossing the Channel are arriving in the UK soaking wet and with petrol burns. The Chief Inspector of Prisons says he's concerned about the haphazard arrangements for those arriving. It follows figures obtained by GBNews, which show more than 14,000 migrants have come to Britain in small boats so far this year. 4 men have been arrested in the UK in a national crime agency operation targeting people smugglers. Ambulance services are facing the sort of pressures normally seen in winter as the UK grapples with an extreme heat wave. The government says it's working to make sure the NHS has the capacity and resilience it needs. An amber heat warning's been issued across parts of England and Wales from Sunday onwards. The Met Office says the hot weather is a potential danger to everyone, not just those who are most vulnerable, and it's advising people to be careful. We're on TV, we're online, and we're on DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dan.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our Media Buzz. 2 front pages in. Wow, the day just gets better for Penny Mordaunt because the Metro, they've gone big on her campaign launch. Reporting on that news that she's topped a survey of Tory party members for who should be Britain's next PM. The Trade Minister would win by at least 18 points against any other leader in a runoff for the leadership. That snap poll of 900 Conservatives found. The Daily Telegraph also leads with Mordaunt's surging momentum in the Tory leadership race. Her supporters were reportedly buoyed today by the result, declaring her a fresh pair of hands with the charisma to beat Labour at the next election. But let's be honest, that's not hard when you've got a bloke who's had a charisma bypass as your main rival. My superstar panel back with me now, Daily Mail columnist, and according to Christopher Biggins, the next Prime Minister of the UK, Amanda Platel.
God help us.
Businessman and activist Adam Brooks and his Zelensky outfit just for Amanda, and broadcaster Ashley James. Breaking tonight, Jeremy Hunt, eliminated from the leadership contest after the second round of voting earlier today, has surprise, backed Rishi Sunak to be our next Prime Minister. Honestly, that's just made me not want to vote for Rishi even more. However, setting out his stall in support of Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg today declared he would refuse to serve in a cabinet under Fishy Rishi.
Do you accept a cabinet post from Rishi Sunak?
No, of course I wouldn't. I believe his behaviour towards Boris Johnson, his disloyalty, means that I could not possibly support him, and he wouldn't want me in his cabinet anyway.
It comes as Tory leadership hopefuls are grilled over what happened to Boris under a newly appointed PM, or what will happen to him. Nadine Zahawi, who was booted out of the race earlier today, said he wouldn't hesitate to have the former PM serving in his hypothetical cabinet. But the turncoat Chancellor Zahawi was clearly trying to make up for stabbing Bojo in the back mere hours after being promoted last week.
Boris Johnson is a friend of mine of 30 years. If he wishes to serve in cabinet, then I would certainly offer him a job. He has been probably the most consequential Prime Minister of his generation.
Meanwhile, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, who dropped out of the race yesterday and threw his weight behind Sunak too, made it clear Fishy Rishi won't be giving Boris a place at the cabinet table.
I was asked the same when I was a leadership candidate. I wouldn't have done, because I'm absolutely certain that Boris Johnson would not wanted a job.
But what about if he phoned you up and he said, I fancy being...
Well, I'll leave that problem to Rishi Sunak. I think he deserves a bit of a break if I were him, and I'm not sure that he would want to continue to be in a cabinet for the time being. But I'll leave all that to Rishi.
So with Boris Johnson's political ambitions remaining strong, with predictions he could return to number 10 like Churchill did, should the next Tory leader give the ousted PM a position in their cabinet, Adam Brooks?
No.
Why?
Because I think if I'm the new Prime Minister, I wouldn't want someone taking the limelight, getting all the attention. I think Boris is such a big character that he would overshadow a Rishi Sunak, a Penny, or whoever it would be. I don't think it would be a sensible move.
But Amanda Platel, he still has so much to offer politically to the country, does he not?
Yeah, but whoever takes over, come on, Dan. It's they're minions compared to him, and the last thing they're going to want is a huge, charismatic. What would they make him? What? Okay, Ashley, fair point. I've written about his lies. That was his fault, but what would you give him in cabinet? The Minister for Women and Equality.
He wouldn't want it anyway. Why would he want that?
There's no way he'd want it. But what would you actually give him? If you look at the simplicity of this question, what would you make him? Would you make him Foreign Secretary? He's done that. Would you make him? You'd have to give him one of the big offices of state. He's not going to take it. He's going to go off and make more babies with Carrie.
He's going to go off and make millions.
And millions. And why not? Even Theresa May's made like 2 million quid.
But Ashley James, this is interesting, isn't it? Because you've got these candidates who stabbed Boris in the back, now all of a sudden wanting to look as if they're his best mates.
Well, this is
we
what
can
I
see
think
through it.
This is what I think is interesting. So the government decided that they had no longer had confidence in him. Nadeem himself, in his resignation letter, said the government requires honesty, integrity and mutual respect, and Boris had none of those things. So why does he suddenly want him in the cabinet? Because he's right. He broke the ministerial code, he lied, he broke the law, he promoted a sexual predator. And also, Boris Johnson...
And alleged, darling.
OK, alleged,
yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to get sued. But Boris Johnson, through his own behaviour, attracts scandal after scandal. What we need to focus on now is the cost of living crisis. And because of Boris breaking the law, it's been a circus of just talking about Boris and his scandals. And even this week, there's so many scandals, they barely even get covered in the news anymore. He travelled to Italy with no officials to see Alexandra Lebedev, someone who is on Canada's sanction list for his close ties to Putin. There was the recording of him talking about trying to suggest a woman that he potentially had liaisons with for an office job, trying to secure Carrie a £100,000 a year job. There is always scandal after scandal with Boris Johnson. So why would anyone want him in their cabinet? We're trying to restore trust and faith in not only the country, but that he's always going to attract scandal.
But any Prime Minister would also probably think that they could piggyback on his popularity. But they'd have to be so careful that he doesn't overshadow
Although, just
them.
think the lovely quote from Ian Duncan Smith this evening, where he said, when you get into this position where you're offering people jobs and saying, you know, you come in and he said, just beware that when they embrace you, they're also stabbing you in the back.
Of course. And what I said earlier, I say exactly the same point. If they're prepared to betray people they've known 30 years, and colleagues, they will do it to us.
Adam,
it's an eye-opener.
I've only known you for like 1 year, and I would not do that to you. Ever.
Really?
Especially when you're wearing your Zelensky T-shirt.
Now, look, moving swiftly along, as I mentioned on the show last night, I wanted to bring you this truly extraordinary moment from the US Senate. Now, during a fiery hearing on abortion laws, Professor of Law at the University of Berkeley, Kiara Bridges, sensationally accused Republican Senator Josh Hawley of endangering the lives of trans people after he asked the most horrific of questions for any lefty snowflake: are women the only people capable of getting pregnant? Watch.
Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing that.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist
I'm
is
denying that
dangerous.
trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get
So you're
pregnant.
denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you? Or are
Absolutely.
they also treated like this, where
No,
they're
they're
told
allowed
that
to
they're
question
opening up people to violence?
We have a good
by
time in my
questioning?
class. You should join.
Oh, I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot
I
just in this
know,
exchange.
absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, that woman is so divorced from reality, she might as well be a flat earther. This is the level of debate now happening in the US Senate. Can you believe it?
Interestingly, today in the Daily Mail, my esteemed newspaper, there was a poll of 7,000 people who explored a millefeuille, which is a French cake of many layers, of the issues around trans. And something like 95% of them said they did not want same-sex change rooms. They did not want people who are transitioning performing against born women in sport. You know, this kind of thing, it just makes you think that the accusations they make against you when you just say, actually, you know, I'm a woman, I'm born with all the bits. And you can't pretend to be me. You can dress like me, you can talk like me, you can wear my lipstick, but you can't actually be this thing that I am.
But actually, James, this was a whole other level. I mean, she's literally saying, if you don't say that you believe a man can get pregnant, then you are encouraging the suicides of trans people. I'm sorry, that is so wrong.
I actually found his tone very patronising. And look, I understand...
Really?
I understand that there can be debate around things such as women's sport, but I know trans people. They are some of the most vulnerable people in society, and whether we like it or not, they
facts are facts.
exist. And the facts are that
he wasn't denying that trans people exist.
If you transition and you are a trans man and you have a uterus, then you can give birth.
You can't have
Hold on, right, one final thing. Hold on, I'm going to say some facts. I'm going to say some facts for the viewers. I tweeted this and it went viral. Women cannot have penises and men cannot get pregnant. That is a fact.
You're denying
no, I'm not
trans
denying
people
anything.
exist.
Trans people need rights, but not
at the expense of
not at the expense of women.
Or science.
Or science. Look, this is facts, and we move on now, and thankfully politicians...
So Ashley, can I just ask you seriously, Ashley? A very simple question.
Yeah.
You think a man can get pregnant? Do you believe a man can get pregnant?
I think that trans men...
That's not a man.
Wasn't what was asked.
That's not a man.
I just think it's not a black and white
It is.
subject. It isn't. And
It is.
actually, most trans women will say that, of course, they can't relate to our experiences as women, as teenage girls, but they are also victims of the patriarchy, and they are also a very vulnerable, if not more vulnerable group. And they exist whether we like it or not.
But Ashley, the point was,
It's different.
he wasn't talking about trans. She wasn't talking about trans men. She just wanted to use the term men, and that's my issue with that. But Ashley James, Adam Brooks.
Ashley has a really fair point here, because it's quite important that generationally Ashley represents a much younger view of people who are more...
And it's important that we put her right on this fact.
And, of course, you can have that view, but a view doesn't change science and doesn't change biology.
What I don't like is that people are saying that you can't be a feminist if you also believe in trans rights, and that is not true. I am such a strong feminist, and my experience as a woman, of course, are uncomparable to that of someone who has been raised as a man, but trans women and men exist.
I get all of that. I get all of that. But a man cannot get pregnant. Now, coming up, as Tory leadership frontrunner Penny Mordaunt vows to return power to parents, should families be given a state childcare budget to use whenever they feel like it? We'll debate that Family First proposal in the media buzz at 10:30, and more newspaper front pages as well. But first, Mordaunt also railed against gender ideology today at her campaign launch. But are the leadership candidates doing enough to protect the rights of women? Olympic swimmer Sharon Davies, one of the most significant figures fighting back against trans extremism, gives her verdict next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Rod Little is coming up, but first it seems like the Tory leadership hopefuls just can't get away from the hot culture war topic of the year. What defines a woman? Today, one of the frontrunners to become Prime Minister and the runner-up in the latest Tory party ballot, Penny Mordaunt, kicked off her leadership campaign with this question from the Daily Telegraph's Christopher Hope.
Chris Hope, last question.
Penny, last one, a quick one and a straightforward one. How do you define a woman?
I'm a woman. I am biologically a woman, and I can tell you, Chris, that if you have been in the Royal Navy and you have competed physically against men, you understand the biological difference between men and women. Yeah.
The Trade Minister, of course, has been swatting away accusations this week that she's on the opposing side of the culture wars to Conservatives. But in her leadership pitch to prove she's not woke, Mordaunt tweeted a picture with women's rights advocate and former Olympic swimmer Sharon Davies to insist she takes a, quote, science-based approach to trans women competing in female sports. And she knows exactly what a woman is. And Sharon joins me now. Sharon, you've been leading the charge, of course, against trans extremists on this. Were you satisfied with Penny Mordaunt's answer today?
Good evening, guys. Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Because we actually went into the Houses of Commons to have lunch with Penny and to try to talk to her about her attitude to what she said at the dispatch box, which was trans women are women and trans men are men, because that does not work when we're trying to put rules together for sport. And at that lunch, she said that she would go away and she would do things. And with my hand on my heart, she did not do anything. So that picture was when it was taken. And that was kind of the last time that we ever saw her or spoke to her. So I'm a little bit upset that it's appeared. But I'm hoping that she's had a chance to have a think about this and that maybe she has realised that biology does make a difference. You know, and it's really important that we understand that trans men are trans men, deserved of respect, equality, to be safe, just the same as the rest of us, and trans women exactly the same. But they're not biological women. And at the moment, unfortunately, our rights are just being lost and thrown away, things that we've worked for years. And obviously, sport is what I know inside out, you know, and it's just not right what's been going on. And that's how I know Kemi, because obviously when Kemi was Minister for Equality, she did so much hard work. She's so determined to try and put some of these things right. And I was in the House of Commons again on Monday at a free speech lunch, which was incredible. And she was so articulate, so bright. And I know people keep saying that she's very young, but, you know, actually she's older than Rishi Sunak. It's just that she looks terribly young. She's been in politics for over 15 years, holds some great posts. She's exactly what the Conservative Party needs.
So this is Kemi Badenoch. This is Kemi Badenoch, who's obviously had a brilliant campaign, a surprise campaign, but is under pressure to drop out and put her weight behind Liz Truss so that the right-wing faction of the party is not divided. Before we just move on to talk a bit more about Kemi, Sharon, can you just tell me exactly what went on at that lunch with Penny Mordaunt? Because she seems to be using that photo with you as an illustration of the fact that she has come around to your way of thinking on the issue of trans and sport. But how did she explain or justify her position at that lunch?
And I hope she has, Anne. You know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you everything we said at that lunch because that's a private conversation. And I'm a really big believer in being honest and truthful. And, you know, maybe it doesn't go down with politics. I'd never make a very good politician because that would be my absolute line that we all have to tell the truth. And I wouldn't be scheming. And, you know, I could not believe what was said yesterday at the conference of Mr. Sunak. But there we go. I hope she is listening. I think the difficulty is in the past that she's had the ear of the LGBT community. And I think after what was been said today, she might find the LGBT community are not so friendly to her than they have been in the past. And that's the difficulty, you know, when you don't go along with them, when, as you saw in the Senate earlier, when you showed those pictures, the moment you don't go along with this ideology, the moment you don't go along with what is almost like a cult, then you get absolutely vilified and the abuse is extraordinary. And I'm sure she's getting a fair bit of that tonight.
Yeah, and it seems like she had a big personal pull as well because her brother, who seems to be a big LGBT campaigner and has been very negative about the Tories' position on LGBT rights. And so maybe she was trying to satisfy her brother on this. You don't know. But it's interesting that you say...
Everybody, can you? That's the problem. You know, that's what at the moment we cannot square this circle. We cannot do everything right the way that a trans woman wants it to be, at the same time doing everything right for a biological woman, because biological women are losing their rights to safe spaces, to fair sport, you know, to safe refuges. And also there's a safeguarding issue, you know, with young people as well, with children. And look at Telford. You know, this is horrendous what's been going on with our law system at the moment. People are frightened to do what policemen are supposed to be doing because we're all PC scared, and that's got to stop.
It's absolutely terrifying, and it's very important that you raise that, actually, Sharon. But Kemi Badenoch, you say when she was Equalities Minister, she was completely on board with you and she was making practical changes, because she really has emerged in this campaign as the woman flying the flag for the anti-woke. And I have to say, Sharon, I love it. I love what she's saying.
And so do I. You know, I think it takes somebody with a very, very strong backbone at the moment to turn around and say, I'm going to take them on. And she's been absolutely determined that that's going to be part of her campaign. It's not all of her campaign. You know, for example, she's also been talking about net zero. Another thing that I know that's quite close to the heart of the people that are sitting on your sofa are there. And the fact that she says it's ill thought through, which I agree with as well. You know, when you've got India, who contributes so much to the CO2 problem, saying we'll start looking at this problem in 2070, whilst we're all making ridiculous sacrifices in this country when we produce 1% of the world's emissions, you know, it's madness. We have to relook at this when we can't afford to pay our electricity bills or maybe put food on the table during the winter. I mean, it's crazy.
I completely agree, and I think you're right. It's sometimes unfair, isn't it, when you just describe Kemi as an anti-woke candidate, because actually, when it comes to net zero, this is completely about the cost of living crisis. And it's imperative that we don't go on this march towards net zero. I mean, look at what's going on in Sri Lanka right now. That's got to be a warning to all of us.
And the Netherlands, you know,
yes.
I despair at our mainstream media who just do not show what's going on in the rest of the world. There is such an internal driven agenda at the moment. You know, news when I was growing up was news about the world, and we could kind of place ourselves in the world and compare ourselves. Nowadays, we don't get that opportunity. We just think that we're making such a massive mess over here and everybody else is having a wonderful time. So not true. You know, look at Canada and the truckers. Look at the problem that America's got. You know, we are not the only ones that are struggling after COVID. We're really not.
Very good point, Sharon. Just finally, I should ask you about Liz Truss as well, to be fair, because, of course, she has always been very, very strong on the issue of women's rights, and I think she does deserve credit for that.
Absolutely, and so does Suella as well, actually. You know, all
Suella
three of them.
Braverman,
Yeah, so hopefully they will come together and work out a way to be able to stand up for women going forward. You know, it'd be lovely to see a woman Prime Minister. I think that we really desperately need a change. We need to get away from the jobs for the boys, old boys club. You know, I want to see real integrity in number 10 and real transparency.
So maybe a united ticket between some combination of Liz Truss, Kemi Badenoch and Suella Braverman could be the way to go. I'm certainly hoping that happens, Sharon, because you don't want that vote to be divided. Fascinating analysis, though. Thank you so much, as ever, Sharon Davies. But coming up, why the culture wars should be the most important topic in the Tory leadership battle. That's the view of columnist extraordinaire Rod Little. He's fired up and ready to let rip at 10:40. But first, as Penny Mordaunt, we've spoken about her a lot today. This really has been the day of Penny Mordaunt, I have to be honest, as she vows to give cash to parents for a childcare budget. Is this a true blue policy or socialism light? My superstar panel return to debate that next as the media buzz continue. And we're going to have more front pages hot off the press too. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And let's return to tomorrow's News Tonight in our Media Buzz. More front pages are now. First to the Eye, leading on the race for number 10 by reporting Penny Mordaunt's surge in polls and the Tory ballot. The paper says she faces a, quote, whispering campaign with Gavin Williamson accused of dark arts to clear Rishi Sunak's path to victory. The former chief whip is accused of trying to allocate votes to different camps in a bid to dilute support for Sunak's closest rivals. Do you know, lots of rumours going around as well that actually this is the reason that Michael Gove got behind Kemi Badenoch, because he wants to split the vote and then put all of Kemi's team.
Michael Gove, a snake.
Could you believe that, Amanda?
I don't believe it.
Could you believe that? The Independent also leads on Penny Mordaunt's promising result in today's leadership ballot. Plus, there's a column from Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner. Oh, I've got to read this. Wonder what she says. Bet it's going to be really original. What's the headline? Toxic Johnson should be long gone. Oh, there you go. There you go. The Sun takes inspiration from The X Factor by splashing with The Six Factor, reporting how Penny Mordaunt is the new odds-on favourite with bookies to become the new Tory leader and Prime Minister. Will there be 6 this time tomorrow night, though? I'm not so sure. Well, actually, I am sure there definitely won't be 6. There'll be 5, but there could be less, is the point that I'm making. The Daily Mail seemingly throws its support behind Liz Truss in the Tory leadership race by covering her rallying cry for the Conservative Party's right contingent to unite or risk losing power. The Foreign Secretary secured 50 votes in the first round of the contest to succeed Boris Johnson, but she trailed who the Daily Mail calls establishment favourite Rishi Sunak and also Penny Mordaunt. Intriguingly, the paper separately says Penny Mordaunt under fire for, quote, lies on her trans views. And actually, I think there's going to be a lot of pickup from our comments just then from Sharon Davies on that topic. It's official. Dogs are our number one wingmen down the boozer, says the Daily Star. According to the paper, good chat and a face like Brad Pitt are no longer necessary to find your soulmate at the pub. Turns out 2 pints of lager and a golden retriever are all you need.
Amanda,
Thank
you might
goodness
need a
I'm
dog.
taking, you know, because I'm a cat person. I'm a cat
Me too.
person. Are you finding that at your pub, Adam Brooks?
No, I'm not finding that. But I just said Amanda should go and get herself a dog.
Yeah, buy a dog, quick, smart. That's
Might
how you
find a
get
man.
It's me.
Amanda Patel, Star Daily Mail columnist.
I could rent
talking
one.
about her love life.
Not a
and
man, a
Ashley
dog.
James, the broadcaster, with us too. As well as using the opportunity to clarify her stance on trans issue, new Tory leadership frontrunner Penny Mordaunt, you've heard her name a lot today, I do apologise, put childcare reform at the heart of her campaign launch. She's pledged to introduce a state childcare budget for parents and carers to be used whenever they see fit between birth and the start of full-time education, which she says will, quote, give every baby the best start in life.
I'm going to be putting power back into the hands of parents. We are going to create personal budgets to allow every child access to their entitlements to subsidised childcare at any time prior to them starting full-time school.
Insisting the move away from fixed entitlements payments would make a big difference to families, who she described as the beating heart of society. Mordaunt wrote in the Times Red Box, "I believe parents and carers are best placed to decide what's right for their child. A new system of personalised budgets will allow every child to access their entitlement to subsidised childcare at a time most suited to their family needs." She hopes the policy will ease the pressure of managing childcare around life commitments such as work and the arrival of a new baby for the 2/3 of parents facing rising childhood costs. She cited a £2 billion underspend in the government's tax-free childcare budget over the past 4 years to help fund her plan. Now, Ashley James, you're very passionate about this issue, aren't you?
Yeah, so actually 54,000 women in the UK every year have to leave work because of the cost of childcare. So to me, it doesn't make sense that if you have two parents who want to work, surely that is better for the economy, it's better for companies, it allows people to retain talent. Nobody should be forced out of work. The cost of childcare, and the average cost of childcare, £263 a week. It's more expensive than a mortgage or rent. So it's just not sustainable for two parents to both work full-time unless, of course, you have the money. So for me, this is music to my ears. It's not a fix by any means. I think the introduction of flexible working would be great, but it is really nice to hear somebody like Penny talk about this. And again, that's why I kind of echo what I said earlier, that I find her quite an attractive, not like that, candidate.
Amanda Patel, you worry this is socialist-like, this sort of policy, though?
Yeah, I just think it's too much interfering. But interesting that Penny, who does not have children, has kind of... I mean, Ashley feels very passionately about it. You're a mum, and I defer to her position on this. You know, but I just think basically the state should keep out of people's the way they organise their childcare.
Adam Brooks, you're a dad. How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm a dad. Look, I'm lucky. My wife is able to bring up my 3 kids while I'm at work. She does work as well, but she's able to juggle that. We're lucky. A lot of people are not that lucky, so there has to be some sort of system in place. I just hope that, you know, the more well-off sort of parents out there don't somehow get a free ride. I think this needs to be targeted at people that really need it and that can't afford it. And obviously, more people working is good for the economy.
So the moment you start means testing it, the moment it becomes impossibly expensive for everyone.
By the way, we have the 3rd most expensive childcare in Europe, and I would like to see a model such as Norway, where the government, full-time childcare from one is £1,000 a month, and the government pays £700.
Look at the rates of tax.
Yeah, but at least people are getting it back. And 54,000 women having to leave their job, it makes no sense. But also, it's something like, it's maternity discrimination, the gender pay gap. These are all things that can be fixed through easing the cost of childcare and through offering.
Because I want the Tories to be small state. And the thing is, Penny, outside of this policy, did say she believes in the small state, low tax approach. So let's hope she proves it.
Can I just say, as someone who doesn't have children, which loads of people don't, I don't really want another tax on looking after other people's kids.
But it's not,
you want to have kids,
you were also,
look after them yourselves.
You were also once a child. You were also once a child, and actually, if we keep making it unappealing and unaffordable for people to have children, well, then there's no future.
That is not happening. That is not.
It is. The Times were talking about taxing child-free people last week because there's not enough.
I just don't want it abused.
Don't get Amanda started on that. Now, the king of the gaff, Joe Biden, got in a huff with a reporter yesterday after he was quizzed about how his own party is turning against him.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who don't want you to run again?
They want me to run.
2/3 say they don't.
Read the polls. Read the polls, Jack. You guys are all the same. That poll showed that 92% of Democrats, if I ran, would vote for me.
He's mad. He's mad. But let's just break down the polls, right, Joe? So this is the newly released survey from the New York Times and Siena College, and it said that 92% of Democrats, if the 2024 presidential elections were held today, would still vote for Biden over Trump or another candidate. Except the reporter wasn't asking that, was he? As was pointed out, 64%, almost 2/3 of Democratic primary voters did indeed say the party shouldn't re-nominate Biden in 2024. Just 29% of registered Democrat voters said they would pick him again to run. Plus, only 13% of American voters said that the country is on the right track, which is the lowest return in New York Times polling since the financial crash more than a decade ago. But in fairness, it really doesn't seem like Biden even knows the direction he's heading in. Never mind the country. Watch. Enjoy him while you can, folks. Just 2 long years to go. It really is one.
He won't last.
Amanda Patel, Adam Brooks, Ashley James, do stand by, because coming up, the crowning moment of the show as my superstar panel nominate for today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackcast. But first, should the war on woke be the frontline issue in the Tory leadership race? And would Sunak in charge be a disaster in the red wall for Tories? Well, columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle is uncancelled on that next. First, though, very quick look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, it's the question dividing Westminster and the country. Who do you want as PM? And are any of the contenders better than Boris? I'll reveal who you're backing in the Tory leadership race. Plus, Trigonometry podcast host Konstantin Kisin has a message for the West. Quit your self-loathing. He'll discuss how growing up in the Soviet Union has made him grateful for Britain as he releases his new book. And as ever, there's unfiltered opinion from political firebrand Anne Widdecombe, social media sensation Zubi, and my superstar panel, Conservative Home columnist Emily Carver, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But now it's time for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And breaking tonight, Jeremy Hunt and Nadeem Zahawi have been knocked out of the Tory leadership race after they failed to secure the support of at least 30 MPs. Rod Liddle is here now with his unfiltered take on the race. And Rod, you get the usual establishment types saying the candidates should ignore culture war, social issues altogether. But you say it should actually be at the centre of the campaign. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. I think 2 things. Firstly, I think the culture war is the most important problem that Britain has at the moment. This has been a long assault over the last decade on kind of every corner of the way we live our lives, and perpetrated by a tiny elite which doesn't have the sympathy of the population whatsoever. And it infuriates people. It infuriates them when Stonewall-sponsored stuff goes into schools telling young children about transgender and LGBTQI issues. It irritates them beyond measure when statues are thrown in rivers, when our history is traduced, and this array of victimhood is paraded before us, this divisive, poisonous creed that everybody who isn't white, male and middle-aged is somehow oppressed. I mean, it's an absurdity. And it's causing an awful lot of damages on our campuses, in the National Health Service, all over the place. And the Conservatives have done very, very little indeed to redress it. And one candidate, at least 2 candidates in fairness, taking part in this race have indeed announced that it will be one of their main concerns, and that's Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch. The other point, of course, Dan, is that every other candidate is simply saying we're going to have tax cuts. They're either saying we're going to have tax cuts now, or they're saying we're going to have tax cuts in a bit once we've paid for stuff. The Labour Party, by the same token, is also saying that it quite fancies tax cuts. There is no clear blue water between any Tory leader who makes the prime approach about the economics of the issue. There is effectively no difference between them and Labour on that issue. So what you do is you choose a leader who really can make a difference, who really will appeal to voters because they're saying something different, something which is perhaps considered too difficult to say, but which people like Kemi Badenoch and indeed Suella Braverman are willing to say. And that's why I think that the culture war is something which could win the next election, the Conservative Party, rather than lose it.
So, Rod, do you have concerns as a result with Penny Mordaunt. Of course, she's the woman of the hour. This YouGov poll today showed her thrashing every other Tory candidate amongst Conservative Party members, even Rishi Sunak by a long way. But of course, she has been described as a woke candidate, largely because of her speech in the House of Commons where she said trans men are men and trans women are women.
Yes, she doesn't know what a woman is. If she wins, we will have three main party leaders, none of whom are able to define what a woman is. And that would be a tragedy for our country. I know a lot of people on Facebook, particularly the kind of red corduroy trouser brigade, who all voted Brexit, much as I did, who rather like Penny Mordaunt. I think largely because they fancy her, but also because they see in her a kind of echo of Margaret Thatcher. I've tried to tell them that her hair makes her look like a golden retriever, but it does no good. I am terrified.
Oh no, she looks lovely. I like her hair, big hair.
I know. Yes, her hair is very flyaway and becoming. But all I'm trying to do is to dissuade them from giving Penny their support, because she is a liberal. She is not a conservative. That is the point. And it's called the Conservative Party. Get a conservative to run it. You know, Boris was a bit of a liberal, but he sort of hopped all over the place. We don't want to go back to the days of Cameron and Nick Clegg. And I think that's what we would be doing if Penny Mordaunt, I have no doubt whatsoever, is a very competent politician, though I found her launch boring and fatuous with those film clips of Oscar Pistorius and so on. I mean, that was clearly a mistake. But no, we cannot have Penny Mordaunt. Please, Dan, stop it.
OK, well, then let's talk about the right, because the issue is there are these three candidates. I like them all, Rod. You know, you've mentioned two of them, Badenoch and Braverman. But, of course, there's also Liz Truss, who has been incredibly bold on social issues. She's not woke at all. She's low tax. I know for a fact that she fought against lockdowns as well, which, you know, for me is that's a big tick in the box. But Rod, there's no point these three incredible women splitting the vote on the Tory right. They're going to have to come together, and surely that means Braverman and Badenoch, the two who you prefer, are backing Truss.
Well, that may be what it comes down to, but I would say I've got a lot of respect for Liz Truss, and I think you're absolutely right in what you say about her. But I would say this: how on earth does Sir Keir Starmer deal with a Conservative Party led by Kemi Badenoch? What on earth
that would be beautiful.
She is a living refutation of everything the Labour Party stands for. You know, she is a young, confident, clever woman of colour who's worked in McDonald's, who knows poor people rather than has just bumped into them at the bottom of the street. And she has made an enormous success for herself. She, I think, would be unassailable. And I think, you know, if Liz Truss were able to put personal ambition aside for 1 minute, she would see that Kemi would bring a breath of fresh air into politics, I think.
I mean, look, I absolutely love Kemi Badenoch. I've followed her story for a very long time. She is an incredibly impressive politician. And you're right, for me, it's her origin story. It is the fact that she came here with zero connections, no money whatsoever. And I absolutely agree, she would be Labour's worst nightmare. But the issue is Truss has more support amongst MPs. She's not going to pull out of the race. There's no way that's going to happen. You know, she's got the backing of the Boris Johnson camp. So I think realistically, Braverman and Badenoch are going to have to back her. But Rod, I want to ask you about Sunak as well, because I'm becoming increasingly frustrated with, although not surprised, with the obsession the BBC and ITV News and Sly News and the Tory grandees. I mean, they are so determined for this man to become Prime Minister, aren't they? They're telling us on a constant and consistent basis that it's going to happen, that it's almost inevitable.
Yes, that might be for good journalistic reasons, though, Dan. It's rather like Nadeem Zahawi, that I was speaking to a couple of very conservative political editors recently, and they both wanted Nadeem Sahawi because they thought, just wait until we've dug around in his finances for a bit. And I think that some of that perhaps applies to Rishi as well, because this is a man with very, very great wealth, and his wife has very, very great wealth. And where there is very, very great wealth, there tends to be a story which is not always, which doesn't always commend itself to voters. Let us put it that way. You know, stories about tax and so on. So I think that may be one reason. I mean,
but you think he'd be bad for the Red Wall, for the Tories in the Red Wall, Rod Sunak?
Not as bad as Penny in a way. And I say that, and I do have a lot of respect for Penny Mordaunt. You know, I mean, she is a very competent politician. She's just not a conservative. I think at heart, Sunak possibly is a conservative. But whether he's a conservative on social issues, I am not so sure. He has been a bit, I think, quite recently, he seemed to indicate that he had a vague idea of what a woman was, which is at least a step forward.
Well, he refused to answer the question when he was asked in an interview, but then he has come out with a policy saying that he believes in single-sex women's spaces. But I actually want to hear him be asked about it, hopefully in one of these debates, so he actually has to answer the question on the record. But look, brilliant analysis, Rod. It's going to be a really interesting week, isn't it? So we'll keep in touch with you as always and speak again next week. Rod, thank you so much. But it's now to reveal today's greatest Briton Union jackass. The Superstar panel return. Amanda Patel, your nominee for Greatest Britain tonight, please.
Dan, first can I say to Rod, I love his new haircut. And my Great Britain this week is Boris Johnson. We'll never see the likes of him again, certainly not amongst this lot. And one of the great things about Boris was that he actually did know what a woman was.
Adam Brooks, your nominee.
I'm not normally a fan of Lindsay Hoyle, but the way he dealt with the two wannabe Bravehearts today was fantastic.
I think we've got we can see this moment, actually.
Shut up a minute! Order! Order! And then shut up and get out! Just shut up a minute! Does somebody want to a want?
I'm actually going to disagree with you, Adam. I think it's quite ironic, a man who says that he wanted to bring respectability back to the House of Commons, screaming at folk to shut up. do you know what I mean? It's sort of, you know, doesn't really go with his shtick. Ashley James, your GB nominee.
I'm going to nominate one of our national heroes, Mo Farah, for bravely coming out and telling his real story about being trafficked into the UK.
OK, great. Well, I'm going to go with Boris Johnson. He was brilliant in PMQs today, and I think it was just a reminder to a whole load of Tory members who think, what have we done? What have we done? Who are we going to get that's better than this guy? Union Jackass time now. Amanda Patel, your nominee.
OK, I'm going to change the title to Union Monster. It's the Tory MP Tobias Ellwood, who ran over his neighbour's cat and just left him to die in the street with his human people.
As cat owners, we cannot stomach that cat.
And how would you feel if someone did that to Dirk, OK? How would I feel if they did it to Ted?
Good choice. Adam?
Mine is Gavin Williamson for trying to manipulate the votes towards Jeremy Hunt. And we all know we don't like Jeremy Hunt.
And Ashley James, your nominee.
Mine is an honorary nominee, which is the French UEFA, because they blamed English fans for being hooligans, but they've now admitted there was a string of mishandlings and admin errors at the Champions League.
Do you know what? I am absolutely going with Ashley James for this. This is just utterly appalling by the French officials, the politicians, Macron, his government, the French police. Shame on them. They saw the Liverpool fans as low-hanging fruit. They lied about their actions. It was appalling, and I'm glad that this report came to this conclusion today. Ashley James, Adam Brooks, Amanda Patel, thank you to my fabulous Superstar panel. I'm back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m, where at least one other person will have been knocked out of the Tory leadership race. Headliners now, though. Good night.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Fairly typical summer conditions for the next few days before the temperatures start to rise through the weekend and into the early part of next week. High pressure is returning, steadily building in once more from the Atlantic. But around the top of this area of high pressure, the breeze coming in from the northwest, bringing clouds and at times some showers to parts of northern Scotland, maybe Northern Ireland, perhaps even northwest England as we go through the early hours. For many, though, it is going to be a dry night with clear spells, and we've lost that humidity. Still fairly warm across parts of the south, but generally a more comfortable night for sleeping for many. Temperatures in some rural spots may even dip down to single figures. So a fresher start to Thursday. A fine day across the south, blue sky, sunny spells for the Midlands, East Anglia, Southern England and South Wales. Further north there will be more clouds and we will see some showers developing scattered across Northern England and Scotland. A few for Northern Ireland, but they will be hit and miss, not everywhere seeing those showers through the day. Temperatures across the north, high teens, whereas further south, nothing like as hot as recent days, but still pretty warm in the sunshine, mid to even high 20s in one or two spots. Still a few showers around on Thursday evening across the northern half of the UK, but they tend to fade until we see more cloud as we head into Friday, spilling back in to these northwestern areas. So